Everyone, I'm Miss Freno and I am your AP Language and Composition teacher. Today we're going to be talking about character development, and this is going to be the first part of our creative writing unit that we'll be working on over the next few weeks. So to get our class started today, we are going to have a do now. So if everyone can take a look at their screens at the do now that's now projected, what we're going to be doing for our do now today is I'm going to ask all of you to think about your favorite character from a work of fiction. So it can be a book, it can be a TV show, any kind of work of fiction that you really love. And I'm going to ask you to write down 5 things about that character that are memorable to you. So 5 things about that character that made it your favorite, 5 things that really stuck out and made them different than other characters. So, for example, think about some of the things that really you might have stuck in your memories. Did they have any notable hobbies? Is that maybe what made them really memorable to you? Did they have a unique family background? Do they wear a certain kind of clothes all the time? Like in a lot of TV shows, the character will wear the same outfit every single time. So think about those things and write down 5 things, like I said, about that character that are memorable to you and that make that character your favorite. And then once everyone's had a few minutes to work on those, I'll ask a few different people to share their examples. Okay, so now that we've had a few minutes to work on our do now and we've had some people share their 5 character facts from their favorite characters in fiction, we're going to go over the objective for today's class. So today we're going to be evaluating characterization in fiction. So as a class, we're going to work to synthesize some categories and come up with examples of character traits and character facts. So what I mean by that is we're going to come up with things that might fit those examples that you came up with, those 5 character facts that you came up with about your favorite characters. We're going to come up with some more examples like that and categories that things might fall into. So what we're going to be doing with that is we're going to create our own initial character profile. So you're going to come up with a character and you're going to use the categories and examples that we come up with to come up with at least 20 character traits and facts about that character that you're creating. And we are going to be looking at things that are a little bit more in depth, but we're going to talk about examples that are, more basic, like character facts, and we're going to be talking about things that are a little bit more in depth, that what make a character or a person what they really are. So characterization is really important in fiction. When you come up with a character in creative writing, when you're writing a character from scratch, you need to know everything about that character because you're essentially, coming up with a whole new person. So you can come up with a character and not really know anything about it, but then they're not really going to seem real to the writer, or to the reader rather. They won't seem real to the writer either. So it's really important for you to know as much as you can about the character that you're creating, because that's going to help you make your story feel real. It's going to help the reader be engrossed, and it's going to help them really be invested in your character's story and what's happening to them. So that's why we want to work on something like this, like a character profile, because it'll help you, come up with your whole story. It's going to help you understand the setting better, how your character relates to other characters. Basically, it's just going to make writing fiction a lot easier if you know your character better. So let's talk about some of these character categories, the facts and traits that we're going to be looking at to create our character profile. Um, so some of the things like I talked about might be a little bit more basic. So age, that's something that's really easy to come up with. So maybe you want to write about a teenager or an adult or a little kid. You have to know that, of course. That's a basic thing we want to know. Another easy one to think of is gender, right? So what gender is your character? You want to know that, of course, going in. You want to know their geographic location. So where is your story going to take place? Or where did your character grow up even? Because geographic locations are of course going to affect our characters greatly. Is your character going to be based in New Jersey? Are they going to be in a different country? All these things are going to affect your story and affect your character, affect how they grow up, how they talk. So it's important for us to know that. And then even other things that might not impact the story quite as much, but that it's still good to know about your character, like hair color. And so as we start to get a little bit more in depth here, let's think about some nervous habits that your character might have. Do they bite their nails when they're really nervous? Do they have some other kind of nervous traits? The type of childhood that they have. Did their childhood shape who they are? Did they have a good childhood or a bad childhood? What talents do they have? Are they really good at sports? Are they artistic? Do they like music? Those are all things that are going to shape who your character is and how they interact with the world too. So as we start to think about not only these examples, let's start to think about some more categories like this. We're not going to get into specific examples yet, but I want you to start to think about the categories like this that you want to be able to answer for your character. So I'm going to ask you guys to, as you're thinking about this, I'm going to ask for some volunteers. And I'll write them down on the board. Some examples of categories to get started with. Like I said, not examples yet, but let's work on some categories that we want to have the answers to for our own characters. Okay? Does anyone have any questions so far about characterization or what I mean about the categories of character facts that we're going to be looking at? Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to work on that, to think about some characterization, and I'll write examples on the board as we continue to come up with them. And this should help you work on your character profile as we get into it as well. Okay, so now that we've had a few minutes to work on coming up with those categories and we have a lot of good examples on the board, we're going to actually get into doing our main classwork for the day, and what's going to be the beginning of our greater creative writing work for the entire creative writing unit. So here I have projected on the board an example of a fiction writer's character chart. So I'm not asking you guys to use this specifically because I don't want you to feel like you have to answer every single question about every single aspect of your character. There are some things that it's okay not to know, especially right away, that might develop or change as you work on your story, things that you might find out the answers to. But I want you to look at this and use some of these as an example because it might give you some more ideas, even beyond just what we put on the board. So take a look at this, and I'm going to ask you guys to take out your notebooks, and we are going to start our character profile. So what we're going to do for this is everyone is going to start coming up with answers to these categories that we came up with. And again, like I said, you don't have to answer every single category, but start coming up with your character. So think about who you want your character to be. We definitely want some answers to the basics. So I definitely want to know your character's age. I want to know their gender. Anything that's really going to be a first time you introduce your character, you're going to have to know about them. So make sure you put those things down, but then start to get into some things that are a little bit more in depth about your character, like we came up with. Physical appearance is definitely going to be more on that surface level, so it's okay to come up with some things like that, but I'd like to see us thinking a little bit more in depth about our characters, about their backgrounds, about their likes and dislikes, their habits, as you can see on the board. And I will switch to another slide as well because there's a few more examples on here of some good traits that we can look at that might jog your memory and give you a few more ideas of what you want to write as well. Oh, and of course, I want you guys to come up with a name for your character too, so that's important. You can always change your name. You can change any of these things as we move forward, as we start to work on our greater creative writing pieces. But for now, I want you to come up with a name, and I definitely want you to come up with those basic traits and then to go a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to let you guys start to work on that now. And I'm going to walk around the room as you guys are working on that for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, and I'm going to answer any questions that you have, and if you need some ideas, that works for me as well. Try to shoot for around 20 things at least, and that's going to be beyond basic things like age and gender or name. Try to come up with at least 20 in-depth things. If you don't make it to 20, that's absolutely fine right now. We're going to have to complete this for homework anyways, whether or not you come up with a 20 now or not. And if you do happen to reach the 20 and you are finished before the 10 to 15 minutes is up, which I don't think you will be, you can turn and see if there's anyone else near you who is finished as well, and you can quietly turn and talk to them and start to discuss your characters, okay? All right, so I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, and I'm going to walk around the room now and see what you guys are up to. Let me know. Just raise your hand if you need any help or if you have any questions. All right. Okay, so now that you guys have had about 15 minutes or so to work on your character profiles, I'm going to ask for some brave souls in our class to share their initial character profiles. So I'm going to give an example of a character that I've come up with, and I'm going to show you how I want you to introduce your character. Because I don't want you to just read me your list off your notebook. I would like you to actually give me an introduction to your character. So here is my example of my character, okay, and how I would like you to introduce your characters. So my character is called Whitney. She is a 19-year-old college student studying engineering. She goes to school in New York City, but she is from the suburbs. That's where she grew up. She had a very happy childhood, growing up as an only child with her adopted parents. She's very friendly, but she also likes to spend time alone listening to music. Okay, so do you guys start to understand how I want you to introduce your characters kind of in sentences, rather than just reading off a list of their traits? So take a minute, think about how you want to introduce your character, and please, can I get some hands raised to see who would like to share their characters? Okay, thank you to those of you who shared with the class. I appreciate it. I hope, maybe it gave you some ideas. Maybe it's helping you to understand how your character might be perceived as, an introduction to your character rather than just list on a sheet of paper. I hope you guys are starting to get a mental image of, what your character looks like, how they might speak, how they might interact with others, because that's all really going to help us as we, move forward creating our fiction pieces. So as we've been talking about, not just today, but also as we've been working through our creative writing unit, we are working towards a greater goal here to create a short fiction piece. And your character is going to be featured in your short fiction piece. This is going to, create the story. We're going to be working on setting. We're working on characterization today. We're going to be working on plot. So we're working on all these different aspects of fiction writing to eventually come up with our own short fiction piece. So let's move on to the homework here for this week. And for this unit, the character development unit, is to complete your character chart. I want you guys to type this up. And like I said, I'm looking for at least 20 facts, 20 character traits, and I want those to be at least 20 in-depth ones, not like, again, I'm saying age, gender. You guys know what I'm talking about. If it should be around 20. I'd love it if it was a little bit more. This is for you because it's just going to make it easier when you eventually write your creative writing piece at the end of this, of the creative writing unit. So type up that character sheet. It can just be a typed list of character traits about them. And make sure, like I said, make sure you have the name of your character. That can be the, on top. Make sure you have your name. And just keep thinking about the story that you want to tell with this character, okay? I really want you guys to start to get into it. Think about, how that character is going to really shape the things around them. And we're going to talk a little bit more over the next few days about characterization, a little bit more in depth. We're going to be talking about how the different character traits and things that the character facts that we've talked about intersect with each other. So we've been talking a lot about intersectionality in this class, not only with writing, but also with reading. We've talked about how, the different characters that we read about, how the aspects of their identity shape the way that they interact with the world and with the other people. So we're going to start to do the same thing when we talk about our own characters that we've created, because of course we want to be aware of what our characters are going to be like as they interact with the world. So we briefly touched on that in this class, but we're going to get a little bit more into that in coming classes as we start to think about how the things that you came up with for your characters are going to impact things like the other characters in your story and the setting of the story and the plot of your story, of course. So keep in mind, if you're coming up with a character who has a very tragic backstory, how that's going to start to affect the way that they interact with the world. Or even if your character is a woman, or even if your character is Black, how all of these things are going to impact the way that they interact with the world and with other people. And maybe that's going to be a driving factor in your story as well. So make sure that you're being aware of that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. Your character chart's not due until the end of the week, so we'll make sure that we have more time to be talking about intersectionality and the more in-depth character traits and how that's going to shape your story as well before you submit your final draft of the character chart. All right, thank you guys for being so helpful in class today. We got lots of good participation, lots of examples, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of your completed character charts throughout the rest of the week, and I can't wait for all these short fiction pieces. They're just going to be very exciting to read because I know you guys have been working hard. All right, thank you guys.